I have possessed all the Blood Knights since the dawn of time, excluding Vox, and now I wish to bestow my knowledge upon all of you. What is that knowledge, you may ask? It's how I feel about every single Blood Knight in the game.
But OP, you already made videos. You have showcases.
And you're right, little Jimmy. But here's the thing. Some of my opinions have changed. And with me being a more seasoned player, I think now is a better time than ever due to the fact that the Knights of Blood Saga banners are currently running. So let's go all the way back to Season 1, when Berwick attacked Grand Summoners. So Berwick is actually in a pretty interesting spot. This man is kind of a unit that can do it all. Once he's in Magia Drive, you get access to his True Art, which is able to buff up his whole team's damage, not even including that he gives himself back his art gauge whenever he does activate his Magia Drive. And we didn't even talk about the art. The art also gives Archchin. He also is just an absolute earth killer. Like, there's not really too much wrong with Berwick. There is one thing that I must say is that Berwick has fallen out of favor just a little bit. And I don't think that, like, he's necessarily bad. That's definitely not the case. I think Berwick is still insanely strong. But of course, we are seeing some new fire units come out that I think, you know, are piquing people's interest a little bit more. Some of those units include stuff like Hao, Yo, Natsu, and everything like that, because at the end of the day, the average player is going to be looking at one thing. It's not going to be about utility. It's not going to be about support. They're all looking at damage. And Berwick's damage has kind of taken a hit. It's fallen off compared to what most other characters can do. He only has a 37,000% multiplier, which nowadays standards is still, you know, relatively high. I want to say it's about average, but, you know, now we're getting units that have like 45k, 50k, 60k multipliers, and it's like, goodness, dude, what is the power creep in this game? We out here about to start hitting Dokkan numbers. Never mind, we already do. But that's like really the only negative about him. Apart from his damage being lower than usual, which is kind of deducted him on some people's tier list, he still is insane. Like, you cannot deny the amount of utility that this unit has is through the roof. Now, I may get this order mixed up because, yeah, OP's a little bit old. I'm only 22, but, you know, my brain ain't really what it used to be. I think the second unit was Riviera. He's still looking bad as ever. She's a force to be reckoned with, man. She was like the first real, I want to say, definitive glass cannon in the game. It was all offense and nothing else. And she still is all offense. She has the stacking crit rate that she can do. She has the insane True Art that is just a constant barrage of attacks. And of course, her Magia Drive is probably the most offensive out of all of them, if we're not including someone like Vox. But it also has one of the worst negatives in the game, which is she increases the damage she receives by 30%. And this is exactly what we can apply to enemies like stuff like True Stratega. It's a multiplicative debuff, and that even includes when it's on ourselves. And even back then, this was a glaring issue with her. She had hardly no defense. Literally, she has almost as much defense as Dark Zeorg. Why did they ever make this unit? You had to protect her either through some type of tanking or some type of barrier. And back then, Sistina was not out, ladies and gentlemen. Rivi's damage is still insane. She still does lots of damage, but she's really slow compared to some other characters. And unfortunately, as Rivi being just a damage dealer, she took a really big hit. Due to the fact that in GS or any gacha game, damage dealers and attackers are always the first to be power crept. And the same happened with Rivi. That's why she's so low on so many people's tier list, but I would still want to say that she still pushes out the damage. Maybe not as much as some of the newer characters, but if you like a character that actually does have a negative and isn't just completely positive, you know, I really hate some of these new character designs. But just know that nowadays, you could run somebody that's probably going to do similar damage to her, and you don't have to deal with the negative of taking more damage. The third unit, the unit that I hate the most, I can't stand him, Fetus. People may always ask, OP, why do you hate Fetus? What's the deal with him? He's just a tank, bro. That's the problem with him. This is the most boring Blood Knight out of them all. He stands there and he takes damage, which, let me just say, he does his job. That's it. You use Fetus when you need a tank, and he's one of the best tanks in the game. His damage is literally abysmal. I'm almost positive that someone like Reyes could outdamage him. Not even Awoken Reyes, by the way, regular Reyes. But in terms of defensive capabilities, he is one of the best units in the game for it. To be honest, there's really not too many other units that could even rival his defensive prowess. Of course, we do get some other taunt tanks in the game later on down the line, but for right now, this man's used everywhere, and it's for good reason. If you do need that taunt tank, of course, you don't always need one. For the love of God, don't always use one. You could use someone like Sistina instead. And coming in to our last unit of Season 1. You all know him well. The final unit of Season 1 was none other than the man, Voxel. Yeah, I'm not gonna do that again. But if you want to go see that full video, you can watch it right after this video, you know. But Vox was so ahead of his time. He literally was. He was one of the first units to get the burst skill archgen, which is absolutely ridiculous. His art at the time, whenever people looked at it, was like, oh, whatever, just increases all your stats by 30%, and then you realize you can use him as a freaking healer. Whenever Vox enters his Magia drive, the man gets skill CT down by 100%, and then he increases his attack by 100%. Plus, whenever you use his true art again, he has 100% crit rate to his entire team. He's probably one of the most simple units in the entire game, but my god, does he do damage. And he enables so many team comps. Back in the day, whenever there wasn't too many 100% crit rate buffers, nowadays, you know, they're just running rampant, you really only had two options. You had this or Regulus. And even still to this day, it's the same thing. Vox is still one of the best units in the game. However, he's a unusual case. Vox is extremely strong because he's able to steamroll majority of the content in the game. Except when it comes to in-game content, that's whenever he's kind of stonewalled. There's not too many in-game activities that you can actually take Vox in. You could probably make team comps around him, but in most cases, he's not one of the best units to take in a lot of these in-game fights. Is it because Yama P and all of them knew how broken Vox was, so a lot of the in-game activities just completely counter him? It could be because of that, but you cannot deny the fact that for 80% of the content in the game, you know what? No, scratch that. 95% of the content in the game, he's one of the best units for it. And let me just say, whenever units like this get released, I feel like it kind of hurts the player base to an extent, because you have people that literally just become so reliant on one unit and they can't really understand other team compositions, or they can't really function, or they get frustrated whenever they can't use that unit. Whenever characters like this come out that are so strong, and whenever they get countered and people can't really think of other characters to use, I understand that it is a nuisance, but at the same time, it's like, how much of the game do you truly understand? And how much of the game is it that you're just bulldozing because of this said unit? That's a thing that's very common in pretty much every gacha game the longer it goes, but Vox was the first time that was made super apparent. And he was the way that we ended off Season 1 of the Blood Knights. After that, we thought it was over until Season 2 came. And let me just say, the Season 2 Blood Knights, a lot weaker, because after Vox, they kind of were like, yeah, we made a little bit too strong of units. How did the Season 2 Blood Knights start? None other than Berwick again, but this time, he's Wigg. And Wigg is a weird one, man. Mostly nowadays, no one really uses Wigg anymore just because Sistina is a thing, and Sistina is just overall better. Same slots, better art, has a barrier plus 20 art gauge to the whole team. The true art gives 100% physical damage and increases the damage the enemy takes, so you're just getting more damage overall with Sistina. Plus, Sistina is faster than Wigg since she doesn't have a Magia drive, which is a glaring weakness to most of the Blood Knight units due to the fact that that does make them slower. So overall, just Sistina is better in every regard. However, Wigg still does have his uses. If you don't have Sistina, he's literally the next best thing. Not only is he the next best thing, he's used to beat some of the hardest content in the game, stuff like Aces. He's one of the main units that people use in that. Of course, that'll probably change as time goes on and we get more fire units, because we're getting an alarming amount of them recently. So it's very likely he may get pushed out of that meta slot for Aces farm. But for right now, he's still one of the best for that. He's literally used in pretty much every single Aces clear for the most part. But yeah, it really is unfortunate because nowadays he's literally just like the waiting room. If you don't have Sistina, Leon, terrible. Literally the worst Blood Knight ever. Her own true weapon is better on her sister than herself. Horrendous. If you get this unit, don't even use it. There's so many other units that are just better. On a higher note, Rosetta. When this girl came out, she was running rampant, boys. I think everyone, whenever they got Rosetta, they used her like crazy, because there's one thing Rosetta did better than anyone else in the game, and it was that little lady could archgen. Goodness gracious, does she have one of the craziest archgens in the entire game, or she did. Just like all the other characters, power creep happened. And she got power creep by one of her own, unfortunately, which is Juno, which then showed the biggest weakness of Rosetta and the biggest weakness of pretty much the Archgen system entirely. She was type B. And whenever they don't know what Archgen type to put you in, they more than likely just gonna put you in type B. And that's really the only negative to her, man. I think that she's still really good on like mono water teams, but outside of that, there's no reason to use her if you have someone like Juno. Type B Archgeners. is the whole reason why this unit has fallen off so drastically. If she wasn't Type B, I still think to this day, she would still be used. Still's a good unit, just Type B Archon holds her back. And then the final unit from Season 2, the biggest disappointment ever, Duke. Let me tell you why this unit was so disappointing. They were hyping up Duke ever since Vox. I'm being serious. They were hinting at him, they were hyping him up, and they were like, man, this guy's gonna be even crazier than Vox. And on launch, he was terrible. He was arguably the worst Blood Knight. Nope, never mind, Leon was still there. But he was like the second worst Blood Knight. It wasn't until later on, whenever they actually buffed him, he saw some spotlight. And nowadays, I want to say that he's actually a pretty good breaker. And that's kind of where it ends. There's not really anything else too exciting about Duke. Oh, wait, never mind. I do remember what that really made me upset about this character. So you would think that the Blood Knight that's a breaker, right? The Blood Knight that's a breaker would have break power up on his Magia Drive passive, right? You know what he has for his Magia Drive passive? You know what he has for his Magia Drive passive? Art gauge 100 up when Magia Drive is activated, and if you break during Magia Drive, art gauge 100 up. The fact that Vox got 100% attack up, the fact that Fetus got damage resistance plus art gauge whenever he gets hit. By the way, he's a taunt tank, so he only gets hit. And what did they do for the breaker? They don't give him break power up. This is still one of the most controversial design choices I think I've ever seen the Grand Summoners team make. I don't see why they didn't give him break power. Maybe they thought that it would be too crazy on him, but screw it. Why not? I don't see what would have been the problem if you gave him like 100% break power up or 150% break power up. I really don't. Breaking is not a thing that people do all the time. For the most part, breaking is really only used whenever you need to do it or if you're like break nuking, which really sucks because I think the break mechanic could be expanded upon quite a bit. However, there is one thing that is very unique about Duke, and it's the fact that the damage that he deals, he actually converts it into break power. Maybe that's the reason why. He may be able to reach some of the highest break power numbers in the game, but even with that, he's still not better than other breakers. Stuff like Platina is still used over him. People like Est are being used. And Est for the longest wasn't even considered a breaker in the game. But after his buff, he receives some much needed love. And because of that, he's pretty solid now. He's an okay breaker, and if you don't have anybody else, and you just need a breaker, you probably use Duke, and you'll be fine for like the majority of the game. I don't see why you wouldn't. The finale. For the Blood Knight saga, they went back to the beginning. They did a prequel, and this prequel was with none other than Juno. At the time of her releasing on JP, everybody saw her and oh my god. They created a unit that not only dealt extreme amounts of damage. This unit had Demonic True Eclipse, and she had some of the best equipment slots for what she was doing. And she had the highest arts per second in the game. No other unit comes close. The only other unit that comes close is a man named Haruto. Or on the global side of the game, Hart. But his name's Haruto. It's what it was in JP. And this unit is probably the unit that no one needs an introduction to. I'm pretty sure everybody has seen it. She has an insanely high multiplier on her true art at 52,000. Not, well, I'll say insanely high. At the time, it was insanely high, but nowadays, you know, it's pretty common for units to have this multiplier, but still, she still outdamages majority of people due to her passives. She gave everyone on her team 7 arts per second. Unconditional, by the way. The only bad part about this is that she loses 2% of her own max HP, which, by the way, you can heal this very easily by using any of the competent healers in the game. And sometimes you don't even need to do it because of her true weapon, which is True Testament. Gives her health back if she ever reaches critical levels. Of course, lose her Demonic True Eclipse for a second, but she would literally just go right back into it and she would gain 100 arts on top of it due to the passive of True Testament. It's stupid. She is by far one of the best units Grand Summoners ever released, and you can see why she is so sought after. It is ridiculous what this unit did for the entire game, and how she kind of made the meta, at least for sustain comps, pretty stale. If you have Juno, you're pretty much always going to use her. Unless you're using like a mostly human team, then you might actually switch in Haruto. But for the most part, it's Juno to the moon, baby. That's how it goes. To be honest, if we ever see the day that Juno gets power crept, it's probably the end of the game. I guess to an extent you could say she did get power crept because there is a unit that gets the release later on, which is Emperor. But even Emperor, I don't think Emperor necessarily power creeps Juno. And here we are at the end of the video. This was an extremely long recording. By long, I mean it was an hour-long recording. Definitely won't be that long once I put it all together. But that is my definitive video for my thoughts on each of the Blood Knights. I didn't talk about the swimsuit variants, and I didn't talk about the Earth Rosetta that we get later on, just because they're actually not considered part of the Blood Knight saga. So, you know, I don't necessarily consider them a Blood Knight. And I was actually going to rank these guys, but I don't really see a point. I think I explained myself enough, and you guys can probably tell who I think is the strongest out of all of them. Either way, I hope you guys found the video fun, entertaining, informative, whatever. If you guys did, please make sure to drop a like on it. This video actually did take, recording-wise, quite a long time, and I know the editing is going to be, oh god, the editing is going to be terrible. Tell me if you guys would like me to do this again with some of the other sagas, like the Phantom Snipers or whatever, once they're done, or Across the Blaze. But that's going to be it for this one. If you guys enjoyed this video, I highly recommend you check out either one of the videos popped up on your screen right now. And oh yeah, before you leave, don't forget to drink water.